What's up, everybody? Ben Razzie here for Odd Chopper Golf, talking a little one and done RBC Heritage. Who are we going to pick? Money up for grabs. We're going to talk about the golfers, talk about the options, and then I'm going to tell you who I'm picking. So you can either tail that or lately you can cross that guy off your list, because I've been doing some very disturbing things in one and done, but it's a long season. We got a lot to get to. If you're just joining us for the first time on this brand new channel, Odd Chopper Golf, all things betting, PGA, golf, that's what you like, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Dive in to the potential plays. I'm just going to bring up the outright market again. I want to be clear. This doesn't make these guys potentially good outrights. It's just guys that I like. So it, of course, correlates. I'm going to give you, quote unquote, a safe pick, a risky pick, and then my pick. Let's start with, I think, an obvious pick in Tony Finau. He does sit 25-1, which I actually do like that outright. But regardless, Tony Finau is just playing solid, consistent golf all season. If you look at his 2023, his worst start was last week at the Masters, and he came in 26th. The guy is a walking top 20. There's no doubt about it. It's thanks to his irons. They've been electric and elite all year. He's closer than it would sink. He's just got to sync up the putter with the irons, and we could see Tony Finau really break through. Now, this is an elevated event. I want to get to that right at the top here. You're talking $3.5+ million up for grabs. So it brings in the elites. These are big-time names, big-time tournaments, and big-time fields. So there's a lot of opportunity at Heritage. This is not a throwaway tournament by any stretch. You look at what Finau's done here, it doesn't play here a lot. Last time we saw him here was several years ago in 2020, came in 33rd, didn't have the irons. I don't really think we draw much of anything to that. The thing about Tony Finau, as I already said, consistently cashing checks, consistently playing good golf. He is just a hot putting week away from grabbing another win. Tony Finau is going to win plenty. We know that. Good player, safe player, solid player. If you have him available for one and done, I have.
What is happening, everybody, and welcome to another DraftKings Reignmakers breakdown covering PGA. We got the RBC Heritage coming up, and just on the heels of the Masters being played, and it was a fun tournament. In terms of the end there, we did get Jon Rahm ended up winning. He was one of the golfers that you could have collected in your starters pack. If you guys haven't signed up for Reignmakers yet at PGA or at DraftKings, haven't checked out any of the products, go claim a starters pack. You click on the link below. It's going to direct you to a starters pack. You're going to have your option of a stud golfer to get in that pack. Jon Rahm, pretty good option this week, coming off of his win over the weekend, and then also somebody we're projecting really well this weekend. But Eric, how are you doing, and how the first major of the year go for you?
I'm depressed. So the single entry, I would have won 1.5K if I had just played Jon Rahm in my captain spot instead of in the flex. I decided to get cute. I knew Jon Rahm was a starter play that everybody got when the packs came out. I was correct. He was 16% owned in the captain spot. That seems a little bit high of what I would want in a single entry tournament. But I had the nuts outside of him. I just had him in the flex instead of the captain, and the captain was the worst possible one out of all five players, Tony Finau, who only shot even. So it was just like, why did I do this to myself? Had Morikawa, I had these stone cold nuts, ended up finishing 31st, and I did the math of if I had put him in the captain spot, it would have been like a 60-point difference, would have won by 10.
So for myself, my best lineup had Rory McIlroy in it, and it still performed fairly well. But yeah, I'm trying to remember who I had in it, but I had Rahm, I had Schauffele, I had like all of the. I had Sam Burns was in one of my better lineups as well. I'm trying to remember who was
he
in
had
which
a tough
lineup.
Sunday.
But I had one lineup that finished not that far out of first in the core contest and had Rory McIlroy in it. Rory McIlroy, who, by the way, has withdrawn from the RBC Heritage. So we're not going to have to talk about him for this weekend.
I don't want to.
Yeah, he was somebody who ruined some of my better lineups last week. And I still got those cards, which going to be able to play a lot of these golfers, Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay. And I guess this is one of the benefits of the PGA Tour kind of changing some of the incentives to play different tournaments, because if this was not earmarked, I forget what they're calling these tournaments in the new schedule.
Elevated events.
So, sorry, elevated events. If this was not an elevated event, we wouldn't be seeing this field normally, would we?
No, never. You would never see this. You see So you're going from Augusta National, which is a strenuous, very, very hilly golf course. If you've ever been, it is a brutal, brutal walk. Well, look at Tiger. I mean, the guy's in shambles at the end of that thing, partially weather too, but you're going to Hilton Head, super flat. So it seems as though it'd be a nice little reprieve from what you just experienced. But normally, because of how grueling the Masters is to be walking, participating in, the pressure of it, everybody takes this week off. You'll run into like the guys who have RBC type ties where they have to be playing. DJ back in the day always played in this event because he had the RBC sponsorship. Now you're just seeing an elevated event. So Hilton Head, they're bringing all of the 18. Jordan Spieth had missed the cut. He ended up keeping his establishment to this tournament last year, ends up winning. It's all over, Netflix. They do the documentary for it. Great stuff for him, but kind of turned his season around. We're going to see a great golf course, that's for sure. It's a fun one out there in Hilton Head, but yeah, this field, unlike anything we've ever seen at this tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, you look through, let me give out our projections, which are totally free over at Stokastic.com. We've got Reignmakers projections. So we got Ryan Rennebaum in chat right there, giving out some of his results from last week. Said Rory and JT screwed me. Yeah, Rory got me as well, like I said before. And then he said that he had Hovland in captain and then Lowry and Woodland in his lineup. And then it was his better golfers who decided to not be any good. But if you guys want to check out the projections, we have 4 Reignmakers totally free over at Stokastic.com. I just threw those into YouTube chat. And the one thing that stands out immediately, Eric, is that we've got Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler in this field with way better odds to be the top scoring golfer than anybody else. We've got Jon Rahm, 9.8% top player probability. Scotty Scheffler, 9.4%. Nobody else is above 5%. You got Cantlay right at that mark, and then everybody else coming in below that. But starting by talking about Rahm and Scheffler, how high of a priority are these two studs?
They're pretty high priorities. I mean, if you have them, you're playing them, again, top player. It's not just what's their top 5 probability, which is right next to it. It's almost a third of the time you're running into them being optimal. And that doesn't count the amount of times in a sport like PGA DFS, where you're going to have players that show up in the lineup that finish 15th or 20th and can still be in that winning construction. So there are so many things where Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler have an opportunity to just slam for you. They make the cut nearly 90% of the time each. It's hard to find 2 more sure things to put up fantasy points in your Reignmakers lineups than what you've got in Rahm and Scheffler, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody.
And we've got them projected very, very similarly. Rahm a little bit ahead, but nothing really crazy. Rahm 9.8% chance to be the top scoring golfer. We got Scotty Scheffler 9.4% chance. Top 5 probability, 30.5% for Rahm, and then 28.9% for Scheffler. 2 best guys by a mile, like I said before. Now, between the two, do you have a preference, or is it just both of them if possible?
Both of them if possible. I would say that one of the differences between running into PGA DFS and this is that you don't have to be thinking so much about the ownership that you're going to be running into in PGA DFS. Last week, you had Scheffler nearly 30%, Jon Rahm 15%. I had way more Jon Rahm than what I had Scotty Scheffler. I needed a big day from Sam Burns, needed maybe Brooks Koepka not to completely nuke the slate from a PGA DFS perspective. But for Reignmakers, I mean, it's one of those things where they're both about 26, 28% owned, because if you have them, if you got them in your core pack, you're just playing them. And because they're the core pieces, there are more cards available of Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler than what there are of anybody else, or at least they're showing up in more places, because when you click on the Rahm pack or the Scheffler pack for your starter pack, you're guaranteed to get them. And there's no way that you're not playing them if you're making one lineup or, as many lineups as you could with that player. So until they start being 35, 40, 45% owned and you're looking at fading in terms of Reignmakers, you just simply click on them, play them, and think about everything else in your lineup.
Totally makes sense to me and Rahm Scheffler, both players that I have cards of right now. We do have a question from Ryan Rennebaum in chat. He wants to know who are some low-end players that project well. So, Eric, if you had to give Ryan somebody who, is available for fairly cheap on the secondary market, and I'll pull this up right now, or just maybe a long shot, who is the golfer that stands out the most to you when you think about Ryan's question here, which once again, just to read is, who are some low-end players that project well? So maybe off the board that we still think are somebody who could exceed what they're going for on the secondary market.
Yeah, there's levels to this, I think, where you have Rahm and Scheffler, they're $35 and $40 respectively. So if we're looking one tier down from that, I'm going to continue. I know that it wasn't a great weekend for him, but Tony Finau, even though this golf course is shorter than you might expect, there's still a demand on being all around a good driver of the golf ball. I expect the putter to rebound here at some point. He's sitting there a little bit cheaper than some of the quote unquote top tier guys, specifically those two that I mentioned. But as you're trying to find flyers, like we're talking $4 or $5 guys to round out your lineups, one guy I keep going to is JT Poston, who's had really good driving numbers all the way around. And Bermuda, you get out here to South Carolina. He's a Sea Island, Georgia guy. Primarily been playing, though, Bermuda better on the PGA Tour than other spots. Multiple wins on this type of surface, on this type of grass. It's not as perfectly manicured as what you're going to run into. You're going to get a lot more grainy situations than what you have at the Masters, where it's like the most immaculate Bermuda, champion Bermuda that you're going to run into. I think JT Poston is a guy that just all around numbers kind of dictate me taking some shots at around $5, $6 on some of his cards. So that's somebody that absolutely nobody's really clicking on. Had a 10th at the Valspar earlier this year, made the cut there at the Masters. Wasn't anything special, but we don't have any of that strokes gain data. I just know the putter was pretty cold from what I watched on the coverage on the app. So I'm feeling pretty good about JT Poston being a good flyer.
Yeah, and like you said, very cheap cards right now. You've got his cores are available for as low as $5.24. That is the current floor. And then the rare cheapest one there is $24.89, as my dad continuously tries to call me during the show. I just texted him, I was like, Dad,
That's how it always works.
Don't call me. I'm busy right now. He's like, okay. And then I get another call from him afterwards where I was able to silence my phone a little bit quicker the second time. But he said, sorry, pocket dial. So very important. If you get a call from my dad, there's like a 90% chance there's a pocket dial coming right after that one. So that's why my phone just went off anyway.
It was nice to see my dad for Easter. We got to kick it a little bit, play some golf. I played some horrible golf on Saturday, I'll tell you that much, but still good to kick it. We got to be nice to our dads. We got to be nice to our dads, take care of them. You know, they don't know what they don't know.
I bet you played better than Rory did.
I bet I didn't, but that was nice of you.
So I'm also curious to ask you, and part of this is to needle you, another part just kind of curious what it is that your input is on this. Live golfers kind of showed out over the weekend.
Yep.
And we don't have to worry about from the Reignmakers product. We don't have the live golfers included, but would you consider that overall to be a positive or a negative for the look of the PGA Tour, where they're really trying to push that we have a superior product to the live and live guys can't compete with our guy? Didn't look that way over the weekend. Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson, guys that were towards the top of the leaderboard. Do you think that has any kind of impact on the PGA Tour?
That's why I wanted to talk about Rory from the get-go. You're like, I was like, I kind of want to talk about him. The guy was a complete no-show, and this is the one major that's been off his resume. He hasn't won a major in 9 years. I think it's just building and mounting on him. He was the guy that was pushing last year towards, oh, we need to have these elevated events, and you need to have them play, and it's going to attract the top players. He's missed 2 of them already. This is his second elevated event that he's just ditching out on, doesn't even care. So I find there to be something going on in that regard. I think it's definitely in the heads of some of the PGA Tour guys, but if you're going to have one guy go out and just kind of establish his dominance, it's going to be Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler as well. Those 2 guys are just so endlessly consistent. They still have the top tier players, but there was no denying that Liv has talent. I mean, the Cameron Smiths of the world, the Brooks Koepkas, Phil Mickelson, obviously, he probably has a better overall resume when you talk about year in, year out than Tiger does now at Augusta National with 3 top 10s. So I feel like, 10 top 3s. That's what it was. 10 top 3s. That's an absurd number at Augusta National. So definitely showed out by the Liv. It's always better to have dramatic storytelling in any sport. I think it just adds another layer to it.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of my dad had said to me when we were talking about the Masters over the phone the other day, he had asked me, do you think that, well, at least something he would like to see is a PGA Tour versus live golf or some sort of tournament, kind of like how they do the Ryder Cup? Never in a million years would the PGA Tour do it. They have nothing but to lose based on doing something like that. Like same as people talk about like the UFC and Bellator doing some sort of cross promotion. If you're considered in the public eye to be so much further above your competition in terms of the other leagues, why risk it, right? If you win, you did what you were supposed to. If you lose, then people go, hey, are we missing something by not watching this other product? So I don't think it would ever happen. But yeah, stuff like UFC Bellator, and by the way, the UFC Reignmakers packs, they just dropped today as well for the Saturday card, which I'm looking forward to. Max Holloway taking on Arnold Allen, and those are still available. I think there's like 5,000 of them or so left for $20 each in the lobby right now if you guys are going to be playing UFC Reignmakers this weekend. But getting back to this PGA event. We've got Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler. Talk about them as being the golfers who are well above everybody else, at least in our projections. The next tier of guys, we've got Patrick Cantlay, and then it's Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa. We've got Xander Schauffele. So if you're going through the next tier of guys, tier 2, behind Rahm and Scheffler, who do you like the best of the next group of golfers who are going to be pretty expensive on the secondary market, but not quite the level of a Rahm and Scheffler?
Yeah, the next tier is a little bit, sorry, it's really, really loud outside my apartment here right now. But Keegan Bradley is somebody that I think you start getting away from some of the other pieces. You get towards some of these players that are more comfortable on a PGA Tour type setting. Keegan Bradley kind of jumps to the top for me. Overall ball striking, I think long iron play, something that I'm definitely going to be paying attention to a little bit more. Keith Mitchell as well falls into that vein. I think there's going to be a lot of skill set stacks that I'm going to add to my Jon Rahms, to my Scotty Schefflers, try to kind of group them together with some of the top tier players. And I think both of them just at cheaper price points where I can kind of justify going very ball striker heavy in some of these spots. Now, there's a lot of ways to skid a cat over here at Hilton Head. You can get guys like Jordan Spieth, who had phenomenal ball striking numbers actually when he got through here. Had the putter rebound for basically 1 week. He had a really cold putter at the beginning of this last season, but all-around golf game here with an emphasis on iron play kind of seems to be the main fortes of getting it done here at Hilton Head. And Keith Mitchell, in addition, I feel like him, Tyrrell Hatton, who's had a really good course history here as well. Lots of pieces that I kind of want to have in that next tier. And then you want to talk about all-around golfers and somebody who has more top tens than anybody on the PGA Tour this season, aside from Scotty Scheffler and Jon Rahm. Sahith Theegala has just been awesome. The Pepperdine product. He's now sitting sub $10 now. He was down at like 6, 7 for the Masters. It's now up to 9, 10, but that's still kind of a discount for a guy who just seems week in, week out to be putting it up. 6 top 10s for him now, starting from the fall swing. So like, I mean, that's as good of production as you could possibly ask for in Reignmakers.
And I'm also curious about some of the recency bias here, where we don't have Rory in the field anymore. I think he would have been a really good buy low for this tournament had he been in the field. Not an option, but is there anybody that struggled at the Masters who maybe people aren't going to be all that high of that in the next couple of days you think could make for good buy low targets because people are like, hey, I just rostered this guy at the Masters. He sucked. He tanked my lineups. I don't want anything to do with them. Is there anybody like that catches your eye?
Corey Connors. I mean, I rode the Corey Connors bandwagon to greatness in the single entry at the Valero Texas Open. Luckily, did not put him in that single entry, but he sunk a lineup that was otherwise perfect and had the Jon Rahm piece to it. So there were definitely some good characteristics about Corey Connors the last 2 weeks. None of that was at the Masters. +8, misses the cut. Nothing good there, but he falls into that same boat of the Keegan Bradleys, the Keith Mitchells, where I think because the field strength is still what it is, but this golf course is not a major championship type golf course. I think there's going to be a lot of players from the back half of this field who go really, really low. And if you can kind of target some of the skill sets and kind of group them together, Colin Morikawa, another piece that I have a lot of interest in for this, he's a little bit more expensive up there at $18 for his core cards. But I think just grouping some of these skill sets together, you know, if they did struggle, Corey Connors was kind of the guy who sunk a lot of people's lineups in PGA DFS last week, one of the highest known for just PGA DFS. I think for Reignmakers, you intertwine him into some places. The guy just literally showed win equity 2 weeks ago. I think this is another spot where going low, going to be a prerequisite of winning here. I don't think it'll be tricked out too difficult. I could see it being a really low winning score. That's exactly kind of where I want Corey Connors to be utilized.
Yeah, and let's see in our projections, where do we have Connors right now? And 1.5% odds being the top scoring golfer, 6.8% top 5 probability, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things, not bad, right? I mean, that's still one of the higher projected golfers that we have of everybody. That makes him, let's see, like the 15th best rated golfer in our projection. So not all that bad. And let's look at some of his cards too. Have you looked to see what some of the prices are?
Yeah, so he's sitting right around $9.50, $10. He's still expensive relative. He's not one of those $5 or $4 bargain bin type players. I got my eye on one guy that we'll round out with too. But I think that he makes some sense. We're starting to get players that are going to be intertwined here that weren't at the Masters. And I think that those are where you're really going to find some discounts. But He played really well 2 weeks ago. He won that event. I don't think you're going to find him $7-8 on the marketplace anytime soon.
Yeah, no, totally good with me. And then, I mean, the other thing too is don't forget, Corey Connors is still like, where's he ranked in the world right now?
He's top 20.
Yeah, so
sure.
top 20. And you buy one of his core cards for $9. You're getting it for all of the tournaments the rest of the year. So it's not like you're only getting him for this one tournament, and the price is still pretty reasonable on Corey Connors. So I don't mind that kind of shout out at all. And by the way, some of the golfers who are priced around him, one of your favorites, Sam Burns, 1.7% chance to be the top scoring golfer, 8.2% chance to be a top 5 scoring golfer. And then also Tom Kim is around there. Tyrrell Hatton is right below him. Tommy Fleetwood. So he's in pretty good company in our projection in terms of other players that have a comparable projection. Let's get back to looking at some of the other high-end golfers and looking at the next tier. It includes guys like Sung J Im, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Cameron Young. Thomas, you mentioned last week that he was probably your least favorite guy that was potentially available as one of the players you could pick in the starters pack. And good call by you. He sucked. Yep. He ended up, looked like almost maybe intentionally bogeying some holes so Tiger could get through the cut at the end. Not exactly what happened, but kind of funny to look at it in that lens. But so Thomas fell apart last week and once again didn't have a great showing. You mentioned the putter has been an issue for him. Is he somebody that you could see bouncing back this week, or is he still somebody you don't want to touch?
I think he's more of like a DraftKings sportsbook bet. He's been around 28-1 here. I can't imagine that you're going to keep him on the bench of anything, but I can tell you one thing. I don't think he's going to be in any of my core builds. We've seen a number of times where he starts to get some of these longer odds. You could definitely take some flyers. If that putter flips, he's going to have an opportunity. He also got a really bad weather draw. He had a 98% chance of making that cut before he started teeing off on Saturday morning. Of course, he ends up missing the cut. So there you go. Tough times for Justin Thomas. I think it was a little bit of a bad draw. Otherwise, you would have seen him play a little bit better, and it wouldn't look so bad what happened to him doubling 18. But I think because of the nature of this golf tournament too, I do like Justin Thomas in shootouts. I think he's more equipped for PGA Championship style golf where you see 12, 14 under being winning scores here. This is a PGA Tour event where I could see 18, 19 under kind of being the winning score. He's more equipped to go low amongst some of the other players. Like, I feel, it's not the Max Homa can't, Patrick Cantlay can't, some of those guys. I think if you're going to find lightning in a bottle, though, with Justin Thomas, it wouldn't surprise me on a golf course like this. But in a glorified putting contest, I'm not going to utilize him in any of my main fields. You just don't want to have him on the bench. It's not like you're not going to use him if you have him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because, even here, our projections are low on Justin Thomas relative to what you would think about the name value of Justin Thomas. But, I mean, it still makes him, the 11th best or 12th best projected golfer in the field. So it's not like you'd be looking at your lineups and saying, oh, look, I'm playing Brendan Todd or Matt Wallace ahead of Justin Thomas. It's not quite there. He's just not really on par with the studs the way that he was in previous years or in some other tournaments at other points. And got another question here from Ryan Rennebaum in chat. If you guys have questions, by the way, throw those in. If you're watching and you're in our Discord channel, at me, or just throw questions into YouTube chat. Ryan wants to know, what are your thoughts on Patrick Rodgers, who is playing well before the Masters? And let's see.
Yeah.
Patrick Rodgers.
Patrick Rodgers popped at the Valero. It kind of came out of nowhere. He had missed the cut at the Corrales, which is a secondary event played opposite the Arnold Palmer. It's opposite the Arnold Palmer. The Valspar 36th, otherwise 3 missed cuts before it. I really don't read that much into it. He had a phenomenal week off the tee, but he had been negative in 3 of his previous 4 to that. He's a guy that had a ton of pedigree coming out of Stanford, had a ton of game. He's a tall dude. He can hit it a mile from time to time, hits that big slinging cut, but I just don't feel like he's somebody that I want to intertwine too much into a golf course like this. The Valero, that thing could still get extended out. You still had to be really, really accurate. You still have to be accurate here too. That's a little bit more of the requirement, not necessarily bombing it. It doesn't hurt to hit it far anywhere, but I'm going to just say pass on Patrick Rodgers. Not going to be somebody that I utilize in the marketplace.
In our projections, he is a 0.1% chance of being the
Seems
top scoring
bad.
golfer. It's not high. 2% chance of being one of the top 5 scoring golfers. It seems unnecessary in this kind of format for Reignmakers, not just because Patrick Rodgers doesn't have these great projections, but it's the reason why. It's because it's such a loaded field. and there's no salary cap for Reignmakers purposes. So, the opportunity cost of rostering a Patrick Rogers, it's taking away a roster spot from a John Rahm, a Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay. So it is really hard to consider him in that kind of vein. And I know you did give out before JT Poston as somebody who you really liked as a long shot, somebody who could be available for cheap on the secondary market. And is there a different long shot you like? Because I know Ryan here is talking about Patrick Rogers. Who's like somebody who is the cheapest golfer available that you could still consider viable, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's probably going to be some viable guys at $1 or so, but my eyes gravitate towards Davis Riley sitting at $2.35. Again, Bermuda preferred surface. We saw towards the spring last year, kind of turned it on, whether it was the Valspar and then just kind of ran with that form after being in that playoff losing there. I think Davis Riley just has kind of that golf swing, that demeanor where these are the kind of golf courses, long irons, just kind of going about your business and the ability to just really go low and spike upside. I think Davis Riley kind of has that in spades. I think Gary Woodland as well is sub $4. I'm going to call that cheap enough to make him a little bit. He's coming back from the dead. Didn't have as good of a Sunday. Otherwise, he'd really be popular and be more expensive than that if he had snuck into the top 5 or something. But he was in the mix there at the Masters, and I feel pretty good about Gary Woodland. Just when he starts finding that form, starts hitting those long irons well, hits those blazing 2 irons, which you can hit about 8 or 9 of those off of par 4s out here. He just feels like that guy who's Saunders his way around and could go very, very low as well. I like him in scoring fests. The U.S. Open that he won at Pebble Beach, that was playing easier than most U.S. Opens you're going to run into. That was on a little bit of a shorter coastal track as well. So a little bit of a comp, nothing that I want to go crazy with, but Gary Woodland, shout out sub $4.
Yeah, if there was ever a day to come back from the dead, it was this Sunday. And by the way,
also, look at you, church jokes.
When you look at Gary Woodland, something that kind of stands out to me when I'm comparing the price of his cards to like a Corey Connors from before, a core Gary Woodland goes for $390, was $5 for Corey Connors, but Connors rare cards were like $25 compared to just $13 for Gary Woodland. So if there's only $1 difference in their core price, it kind of does stand out that Woodland's rare card is about 50% the cost of Connors rare card. So just something to consider, because I know a lot of times especially us now with the sports betting stuff we're into, we're always talking about market-based tools and now we're comparing stuff on the market. Kind of a similar sort of theory there when we're looking at Gary Woodland. So I'm going to pull back up our projections and go to that page. And is there anybody for this tournament that's projecting well that you're just lower on? You look at our projections and, whether it's somebody in the range of like a Justin Thomas, Cameron Young, Sam Burns, are there any golfers you think the field will be on or might be willing to buy in the secondary market? Do you think this is just a bad setup for them this week?
Yeah, I don't know what to do with Max Homa here. He's kind of been California dominant for a very long time. And you're looking at some of his form. He had another tough run around Augusta. You wouldn't expect this for a guy who just has unbelievable stats at the beginning of the season. But if it hasn't been in the Southwest, he's really been struggling. I mean, you go back to the FedEx Cup playoffs, 24th Rocket Mortgage leading into it, 42nd at the FedEx St. Jude, 23rd at the BMW. These are fine results, but not like your elite type player results. 43rd at the Masters. Didn't seem as though he kind of had his game in shape yet again for it. He's kind of had the bugaboo of the Masters. Now, he has one at the Wells Fargo, so you can't just extrapolate data and say, he's terrible out on the East Coast by any means. But it does seem as though the form wanes a little bit when you move out east for him here. I think he'll gain more experience. He's now locked into the PGA Tour for as many years as you could imagine with how many wins he's strung together in the last year. But I think Max Homa is a player that I'm just a little bit lower on than our projections.
Okay. No issues with that whatsoever. And is somebody who's fairly expensive. If I'm not mistaken, He's like in that second tier of golfers right now. I'll pull up Max Homa to see where
right now going at $20 for a core low.
$20 for a core, $95 is the floor for a rare. So Max Homa's pretty expensive. He is, let me compare him to a comparably projected golfer for us. We've got Max Homa, like Tony Finau, nearly identical projections for us on Tony Finau and Max Homa. Let's see how these two look side by side. Yeah, Finau's quite a bit cheaper. So just to show how minimal difference there is in our projections, we actually have Finau slightly at nothing that's significant. But Finau, 2.8% chance to be the highest scoring golfer. Homa, 2.7%. Finau, 12.6% chance to be a top 5 finishing golfer for the slate in terms of fantasy score, 12.1 for Homa. And then even if you look at sports books, the odds on Finau to win this week are shorter than Max Homa. Yet you look at the marketplace right now, Homa's cores, we talked about before, going for a floor of about $20, 15 for Tony Finau though.
Yep. Love that process that you go through. I do that all the time where I just have the DK Sportsbook sitting up on the left side of my screen. And I just kind of say, where is the market inefficient? Where are odds makers kind of setting the lines for some of these guys to succeed? I mean, that's how DFS salaries come out. And, there end up being hot spots where certain players are very, very owned because of it in DFS. But in a sport like DraftKings Reignmakers, or in a competition like DraftKings Reignmakers, we just have to find the best plays and not have them be crazy, crazy overowned. Again, that was where I got, I think, a little slipped up trying to get contrarian away from the ROM captain, knowing he would be so popular there. But you don't really have to think about it when it's not somebody who's a building block essential right from the get-go there in Finau. You can play him in the captain spot or in the golfer spot, just the regular spot. And know that that's a piece that the field just doesn't have that much of.
And that is going to do it for us this week. So hope you guys watched the show. You enjoyed it. And if you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget that if you haven't checked out PGA Reignmakers yet on DraftKings, click on the link below. You're going to get access to a totally free starters pack. You're going to get to choose a stud golfer to have in it. And also you're going to get golfers to fill out the rest of your lineup. So go check that out. Click on the link below. That does it for us today, guys. I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoy the Reignmakers contest. We'll see you back here next week.